الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه الطيبين الطاهرين. I ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant us all the sincere intentions. باب لا يستغفر لأبيه المشرك. The chapter of not seeking forgiveness for one's non-Muslim parent. Literally the chapter here says not seeking forgiveness for one's polytheist parent, but it encompasses also the non-Muslim parent. So if a person is not allowed to ask Allah to forgive the non-Muslim parent if they have died upon other than al-Islam. Allah revealed that in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. Allah Ta'ala does not forgive any person who was accountable and then died as a kafir, died as a non-Muslim. Allah will not forgive them because they had their opportunity to believe in this life. As for a person who was a Muslim but they died as an enormous sinner, such a person, they may be forgiven. As for the non-Muslim, then this is something that Allah informed us about in the Quran, that Allahu la yaghfiru an yushraka bih. Allah does not forgive those that worship other than Allah. And also, Allah does not forgive those that, for example, were a different type of non-Muslim, where they didn't worship other than Allah. They might have been an atheist. They didn't believe in worshipping anything. The judgment is the same. So Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, he said that Allah revealed, إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. This ayah in the Quran, it means that if your parents, if both of them or one of them, if you are alive to see them in their old age, then don't say the word uff to them. And we spoke about this before. This is because it breaks the heart of the parent. For example, if the parent, the mother or the father, says, do such and such, and the parent and the child says, uff, or anything that is like that. The Arabs, when they are displeased with something, they'll say uff. Like that, we discussed this before. So this is an enormous sin. Just uttering that is an enormous sin. Uttering that to the parent, because it breaks the heart of the parent. So saying that to one's friend, for example, to a companion, to a friend, this is less of a matter than saying it to the parents. This is what our religion says. To note here, these matters are taken through revelation. Whatever was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, then that is what we go by. We don't compare and we don't try to deduce the judgments ourselves. We go back to the scholars. The scholars said, for example, that stealing, so we compared saying uff to the parents and saying uff to one's friend. It's less of a matter saying it to the friends than it is to saying it to the parents. Stealing, for example, if you look at stealing from one's parents compared to stealing from other than one's parents. Of course, both matters are sins. But stealing from one's parents is less of a matter than stealing from someone else, because the parents, they are compassionate. Even though it's sinful, it's considered less of a matter stealing from them. So we say that to highlight that these matters go back to revelation. They go back to revelation. So Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, he recited this ayah all the way up to كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا, up to this part of the ayah, which talks about making dua for the parents to take care of them in their old age, just as they had taken care of one when one was young. He said, فَنَسَخَتْهَا الْآيَةُ الَّتِي فِي بَرَاءَةٍ, that then there was an ayah that was revealed, okay, which is the following ayah, مَا كَانَ لِلنَّبِيِّ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَن يَسْتَغْفِرُوا لِلْمُشْرِكِينَ وَلَوْ كَانُوا أُولِي قُرْبَى مِن بَعْدِ مَا تَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُمْ أَصْحَابُ الْجَحِيمِ. This ayah, it refers to the fact that it was revealed that the Muslims, they are not allowed to ask Allah for forgiveness for their parents who died as non-Muslims. So you imagine the Muslims, or the early Muslims in Mecca, when they accepted the message of the Prophet ﷺ, their family members, their elderly family members, like their parents, their aunts and uncles, who did not embrace al-Islam, if they died having heard the call to al-Islam, they would have died as non-Muslims. So once they have died, now it's not permissible for the Muslims to ask forgiveness for them, of course. So neither the Prophet nor the lay people, and here the lay people being the companions then, neither the Prophet nor the lay people were allowed to ask Allah to forgive those that died upon kufr. The Prophet ﷺ, he would sometimes, he said to his uncle, for example, Abu Talib, who did not believe in him. But while he was alive, it wasn't revealed to the Prophet ﷺ that Abu Talib would die as a kafir. It was not revealed to him. So the Prophet ﷺ said that I will سأستغفر لك ربي ما لم أنه عنه, that I will astaghfir, and I will explain that, for you, I will astaghfir my Lord for you until I am told not to. Meaning, I will ask Allah to guide you to al-Islam, and hence through embracing al-Islam to then forgive you. And I will do that as long as I am not told that you will die upon kufr. Abu Lahab, for example, you take his example, you know the surah al-Masad, Tabbat yada Abi Lahabin wa tab. In this surah, it was revealed while Abu Lahab was alive that he would be in hell. So he was a walking, talking example of somebody who would be in hellfire forever without an end. So he was Jahannami, if you will, while he was alive. So the Prophet didn't make dua for him. He didn't ask Allah, Ya Allah, guide him, because it was revealed. It was revealed that he would die as a kafir and he would be in hell. People would say to Abu Lahab, why don't you just belie him? He says, Muhammad ﷺ, says that revelation comes to him and that it's being willed that you will die as a disbeliever in Islam, so why don't you belie him by embracing Islam? Then we'll all show that he's a liar. But Allah had eternally willed that he wouldn't, of course. So he died in that state. So the Prophet ﷺ did not make dua for him. He did not make dua to Allah for Abu Lahab to be guided to al-Islam. So as for the Prophet ﷺ, this was the case that he used those words. He said to Abu Talib, سَأَسْتَغْفِرُ لَكَ رَبِّي مَا لَمْ أُنْهَ عَنْكَ, that I will astaghfir. This doesn't mean that the Prophet is saying or was saying that I will ask Allah to forgive you while you are a non-Muslim. Of course not. Rather, what this means is that he, alayhi salatu wasalam, would make dua that Allah guides Abu Talib to embrace al-Islam, and by embracing al-Islam, he would be forgiven of blasphemy, of course. So this wording to say to a non-Muslim, I will ask forgiveness for you, this is something that we who are not the Prophet ﷺ, we don't say that. We can't say that. Rather, that was something that was exclusive to the Prophet ﷺ, wording it in that way. That I will seek forgiveness for you, with the meaning that I mentioned. So the Prophet ﷺ, he would be able to make that statement. As for one of us, we don't make that statement. Rather, what we say is, may Allah forgive you by guiding you to al-Islam. So we don't say to a non-Muslim, may Allah forgive you, like that. We don't mention that statement in an unrestricted way, may Allah forgive you. What we can say is, may Allah forgive you by granting you to enter al-Islam, or by guiding you to al-Islam. We must make that restriction. This is a case in which there is a difference between what applies to the Prophet ﷺ and what he could say and what we can say. Then you look at other places in the Quran with the different prophets, like Nuh alayhi salam. He said, "Istaghfiru rabbakum," which if taken literally it would mean, ask your Lord for forgiveness. The scholars, they said that literally, and this is not what is intended, literally what that would mean is, O people, say, while you are non-Muslims, say, O God, forgive me. And this is not the way to embrace Islam. To say, oh God, forgive me. Because it would mean, forgive me while I am a non-Muslim. Rather, one embraces Islam by saying the two testifications. Okay? So the scholars looked at different, the speech of different prophets in the Quran, their stories, how Nuh alayhi salam said a statement, and how Ibrahim alayhi salam said a statement, which the scholars interpreted, they had to interpret it, to mean that, oh Allah, guide them to al-Islam so that then they would be forgiven. So, to clarify, finally in summary, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam did not say to his father, and did not intend that I will ask Allah to forgive you while you are a non-Muslim. Meaning that you would die as a non-Muslim, and then I would ask Allah to forgive you whilst or despite you being a non-Muslim, and that you would enter paradise while being a non-Muslim. No. Someone might misunderstand that. And that's why it's dangerous for a person to pick up a translation of the Quran, because Allahu A'lam who's written that translation. Allahu A'lam how precise they are in their wording. Allahu A'lam if they've studied very well, if they know the Arabic language very well. Allahu A'lam if they've learned in the proper way. A person doesn't know. So why would a person put their religion in the hands of a translation who they don't even know who's written it? Or even if they do know, they don't know that person to be Islamically trustworthy. Some people might say, oh, but he wrote a translation of the Quran. But does that qualify a person to be trustworthy in the religion just because they compiled a book? No, it doesn't. So it's important for a person, if they want to learn the Quran, they learn the meanings of the Quran ayah by ayah. The religion is not a self-study. It is not a self-study. Allah revealed in the Quran, and this should send alarm bells and warning bells to every person who wants to pick up the Quran and recite and read translations. Allah revealed in the Quran, يَضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. That by the Quran, Allah Ta'ala guides many people, and also by reading the Quran, many people misunderstand and they become misguided. Someone might say, well, I thought the book of the Quran was a guide for everybody. I thought, that it was a miracle, and isn't it a guide for everybody? Yes, but you have to use it in the correct way. You have to use it in the correct way. If you take a tool and you don't use it properly, and it doesn't work, and then you complain, then this shows that this person didn't have the correct knowledge. If a person, for example, they have a key, it's a tool, they stand in front of a door, and they put it on the front step, and they wait for the door to open, or they scratch the door, or they put it in this way and that way. They don't actually put the key in the lock. It's not going to work. Like that, the Quran, a person needs to learn about it in the proper way. Some people say, well, I thought the Quran was for everybody to recite. Yeah, to recite it is. To recite the Quran, this is for everybody. Even if one doesn't understand what the meanings are, they acquire blessings. The Quran is for everybody. But nobody said that extracting rules from the Quran is for everybody. No, that's for a specific small group of Muslims who were bestowed the strong intellects, and they were granted great knowledge. Those people, the scholars, they deal with that side. But the Quran is not for everybody in the sense that everyone can extract judgments from it. No, this is not the case. So someone might ask, well, how do we learn the Quran then? How do we learn the meanings? This is the book from God. How do we learn the meanings of the Quran? Well, you have to learn sitting with a teacher, ayah by ayah by ayah by ayah, verse by verse, to say, when it was revealed, what did the scholars agree upon in terms of its meaning? What are things that you can say about this verse? What are things you can't say? Through a teacher. Otherwise, imagine all of us, we picked up a translation of the Quran, different translations. And we were brought up differently in different households. Our mother had a personality, our father had a personality, the friends that we were with, what we like to eat, what we like to wear, the time we like to sleep, what we like to do in our spare time. All of these things, the society, it builds people in different ways. So I read the translation of a certain verse, and if it's down to my opinion, I might be affected. Oh, that applies to me. Oh, I experienced something like that vaguely. But to you, you just pass by it. You don't understand anything from it. You're like, okay, let's move on to the next one. Right? We understand different things. If it was the case that we just read, then how would it be one message as Allah Ta'ala revealed that it is? How would the rules of Islam be one and unified? It would be so many supposed different versions of Islam. That's why the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wassalam, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. Knowledge occurs by learning. There is a chain. There are, if you want to put it like this, imagine there are 50,000 statements, about the Quran that are correct. Imagine that's it. There are 50,000 statements about the Quran that are correct. That have come from whom? That have come from the Prophet's mouth, alayhi salatu wassalam. These 50,000 statements, let's say, they were memorized and copied down by the companions and passed on, and passed on, and passed on. Some of the scholars, they elaborated upon those statements in a good way, in a correct way. Fine. So then they were passed on, and passed on, and passed on. Now, if a person doesn't have a chain for what they are saying, going all the way back to the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam, then where are they getting that from? It's not authentic, it's not authenticated, it's not validated. Where are they getting it from? From their whims and desires. Like I said, we are different. We have We have a different makeup in that sense. Okay, we experience different things. We were raised in different societies. We have different cultures. One cannot resort to that to interpret the Quran by themselves. Rather, the Quran is to be interpreted in the way that the Prophet intended, alayhi salatu wassalam, and as was conveyed to him. So that's an important note about translations. Very, very important. So the way that a person would learn about the Quran is if, for example, if there were trustworthy and reliable people who taught the tafsir of the Quran, starting from al-Fatiha, going through every single verse, mentioning when it was revealed, why it was revealed, who was there when it was revealed, what is the meaning of it that the scholars gave. And like this, they went through the whole Quran. So you might say, wait a second, do I have to sit for years to go through each verse of the Quran to learn what it means? Yeah. The Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, إِنَّمَا الْعِلْمُ بِالتَّعَلُّمِ. What do you want to do? Sit on your sofa with a cup of tea and just read like it's a novel? It's not like that. It's so sacred. It's not like that. So, it was not permissible for anybody to ask forgiveness for their parents who died as non-Muslims. In the beginning also, because it was feared that some of the Muslims with weaker hearts, they may go to visit the graves of their non-Muslim parents, that they may then ask Allah to forgive them, which would be kufr actually. That would be blasphemy. If Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala reveals something in the Quran, such as this, that Allah does not forgive a person who dies upon kufr. Okay? We know that this is what Allah has revealed. Now if a person goes to the grave of their parent who was either an original blasphemer, they were a Jew or a Christian or whatever they were, or they were somebody who was a Muslim and then they fell out of Islam. And then they died thinking they're a Muslim, but they fell out of Islam. If a person knew that about them, while knowing that Allah revealed in the Quran that Allah will not forgive these people, even if it's one's own father and one's mother, one is not allowed to ask, oh God, Ya Allah, Ya Rab, my Lord, forgive my father for he was good to me. Why? Because a person is asking Allah to belie himself. Allah revealed what means, I will not forgive. I will not forgive this person. And then a person comes and says, but Ya Allah, forgive this person. The scholars judge this to be kufr. Said this is blasphemy because it's not submitting to what Allah revealed. This is like an objection to Allah Ta'ala. So the Prophet ﷺ was ordered to prohibit the Muslims, the early Muslims, from going to the graves. In case one of them or some of them ask or commit kufr by asking Allah to forgive their polytheist parents, their idol-worshipping parents. Later on, when the Muslims found strength and they migrated to al-Madinah, and there were many of them now, and there were many children also being born into al-Islam, into Muslim households and so on. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Kuntu nahaytukum an ziyarati al-qubur." I had prohibited you from visiting the graves. Ala fazuruha. But now you can visit them. Because that which was feared before was not feared now. The Muslims became more content with the fact that their parents, some of their parents, they had died upon other than al-Islam. The Prophet ﷺ, he passed by the grave of his mother, and he said, although the mother of the Prophet ﷺ, Lady Amina, we believe that she was a pious slave of Allah, a believing slave of Allah, a Muslim woman, a righteous woman. She passed away. And there are different narrations about how she is considered a believer and so on and so on. We won't go into that right now. But the Prophet ﷺ, he told the companions that I was permitted to visit the grave of my mother. So they were on their way back from a battle that they had fought against some of the non-Muslims. So they stopped at al-Abwa, and the Prophet ﷺ was given permission. He said, I was given permission to visit the grave of my mother. And so he did, ﷺ, and he cried. This was the first time he visited the grave of his mother after some 50 years. The last time he saw the grave of his mother was when he buried her. He was 6 years and 100 days. And Ayman, a slave woman, who he later inherited, who he used to say about, she is my mother after my mother. She helped bury Lady Amina in that place. In the wilderness, still, it's an uninhabited area. So he said, alayhi salatu wassalam, Allah allowed me to visit my mother, but Allah did not allow me to ask for forgiveness for her. Not because she died as a non-Muslim, no. Because if some of the other companions had seen the Prophet ﷺ make dua for his mother, for forgiveness and for good and so on, they would think that, perhaps they would think maybe we can do that for our non-Muslim parents too, although she wasn't a non-Muslim. Her case, the scholars said, was a special case. Her case and the case of the father of the Prophet ﷺ. So he said, أَذِنَ رَبِّي لِي فِي زِيَارَةِ أُمِّي. Allah permitted me to visit the grave of my mother, وَلَكِنْ مَنَعَنِي مِنَ الْإِسْتِغْفَارِ لَهَا. But I was prevented from asking forgiveness for her, for this wisdom. Later on the companions understood, but at that time, this was the wisdom. So it is difficult. Like I said, sometimes a person might fall out of Islam. If they are still alive, and it happens, there are many people that are arrogant and they don't accept. But a person keeps working on them. Sometimes they might say a statement, a person might say a statement that lands them out of Islam. But because they didn't learn the religious knowledge in the correct way, when you try to fix that matter for them, you tell them to say the Shahada again, embrace Islam, repent, this is the way to repent. They don't accept. And you might stay in that struggle for years, 5, 6, 7, 8, 20 years sometimes. But a person should continue making dua as long as this person is alive. Ya Allah, open their heart up, guide them to Islam. But if they die in that state, then it is, subhanAllah, it can be very tough. If a person had heard something kufr from their mother, their father, or a relative, let's say everybody else didn't hear that kufr from them. This person now, let's say, you cannot pray the janazah prayer for them, because the funeral prayer contains asking forgiveness, but there's no forgiveness for a kafir. Likewise, there are rules of inheritance that are involved. Likewise, going to the graveyard to bury and pray for them, that also a person cannot do. So it gets very... Allah tests His slaves. Likewise, for people who embrace al-Islam, while they came from a family that was not a family of Muslims. So they embrace al-Islam, and their parents and siblings are not Muslims. A person keeps trying. We've got some hadith that come after this now. They talk about how to show good treatment to one's non-Muslim family members, to try to get them to embrace al-Islam through one's behavior. We're going to talk about that soon, and how that's even rewardable if a Muslim does that towards a non-Muslim. But this is a very, very key point, there is no special rule for one of us. If we know that our parents, or one of our parents, or one of our loved ones, one of our siblings, or that's what I mean, who was a Muslim and then died upon kufr, or died upon kufr, they were an original blasphemer, one cannot ask for forgiveness. One shouldn't trick themselves and say, Allah is so merciful. Surely, of course, Allah can forgive this one person. But Allah revealed that He won't. That's it. There are no favors in this regard. There are no favors. So one has to live with that and be patient with that. And they get reward for being patient with that. But a person cannot make dua in secret and say, oh Allah, I know that my mother died as a non-Muslim, so but forgive her. I ask this favor of you, Ya Allah. You are my Lord. No. This is not permissible. This is actually kufr. Takes a person outside of Islam, because it means that a person is asking Allah to belie Himself. And the scholars categorically said, unanimously said, this is blasphemy. MashaAllah. We got through one chapter today. Did we finish the reading? Yeah, so lastly, Allah revealed, ما كان للنبي والذين آمنوا أن يستغفروا للمشركين ولو كانوا أولي قربى من بعد ما تبين لهم أنهم أصحاب الجحيم. That the Muslims are not allowed to ask Allah to forgive al-mushrikeen, the polytheists, the non-Muslims, even if they were relatives, after it has been made known to them by revelation that they are people of hellfire. Whether they were still alive, like Abu Lahab was still alive, and the Prophet was told, he is among the people of hellfire. He will die as a non-Muslim. So the Prophet ﷺ did not make dua for him. As for his uncle Abu Talib, it was not revealed to the Prophet ﷺ during the lifetime of Abu Talib that Abu Talib would definitely die as a kafir. So the Prophet said ﷺ, I will ask Allah to guide you to al-Islam so long as it's not revealed to me otherwise. So once it's revealed that they would die upon kufr, or they died and a person knew that they were a non-Muslim, one is not allowed to ask forgiveness for them, as Allah revealed in this verse. Okay? Let's say La ilaha illallah and as-salah ala nabi. La ilaha illallah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Next time we talk about chapter 13, treating the non-Muslim parents well.